Emily, it's Brad. How are you?
Hey Brad, how are you?
Good.
Good.
Anything we need to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we are all set. I expect the Congresswoman around 2:15, so I will introduce her when she gets here. But if she's a little bit late, we'll just, kind of just stall a little bit.
Yeah. So do you want me to have the board introduce themselves? And then,
Yeah, if you want to just have the board introduce themselves briefly at the beginning, like my email noted, and then when we do the neighborhood environmental survey, if folks want to pipe up more about their specifics, like, and Lene might not still be on, so Lauren Olson will do that for her, things like that. But I think we should all, board members that are here should all be introduced during the welcome and opening remarks.
right. And then you want to go around the room like we normally do and have individual member or attendees introduce or?
I think maybe not,
Okay.
just because I'm not sure how many people there are. And what I would hate to do is get halfway through and then, the Congresswoman gets on. Hey, Dave.
Hey there.
Hey, Dave, how are you?
Hey, Brad, how are you?
Good.
Great to see you.
Yeah. We're all here virtually, I guess. So
Yeah. Well, I can see you anyway.
I guess you guys got the contract with the Rocky Mountain Airport Noise Roundtable.
Yep. I don't know where
Yep.
Dave went.
I just hadn't
No, I'm here.
said that to Dave yet, but anyway, congratulations. So
Yeah, thank you, Brad.
yeah.
If you had something to do with that, thank you so much.
Well, I tried. I don't know. So I guess the bottom line is it was a team effort and you all got it. So that's great.
Well, we really appreciate it. Thank you again. That was great.
Yeah.
Thanks for your help.
Yeah.
What's the weather out like in your neck of the woods there, Brad?
Well, right now it's going to be 60. It probably almost is 60. Blue sky,
All right.
no clouds. Now on let's see, when was it? A few days ago, we got 11 inches of snow here.
Oh, 11 inches. Oh my.
But
Oh, geez. We're complaining when it's 45 out here at Millbrae. That's cold for us.
Yikes. That is cold. That's colder than here.
Yeah. That's our usual morning temp when we get up.
yeah. Yeah.
But no snow, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Hey, how about that? Is everybody still talking about that United engine failure over Broomfield?
Yeah, it's kind of died down now. After it happened, everybody was out. The neighbors were out looking at pieces, and they said, "Don't pick up the pieces. Leave them alone."
Right.
But the FAA United came out, and NTSB picked up all the pieces, and then they said, a few days later, they said, if you live out there and you find a little nut or a bolt or a little tiny piece, you can keep it.
Oh, really?
No, thanks.
Yeah. That's not the kind of souvenir I think I would want.
Yeah, and people want to, they interviewed.
You're freezing up, Brad. Is it me or is it you guys?
I think it's Brad.
Oh, okay.
Hey, strangers.
Hi. So good to see you.
You too. Gosh, it's been so long.
I know.
Yeah.
It has been.
Some guy on TV with his little kids and says,
Oh, you cut out, Brad. We missed
Yeah,
it.
Brad's cutting out.
Oh
Brad's cutting out there a little bit.
"There's a lot a while, but I'm back. I've had internet problems at home, but anyway, I'm here." Hey, there's Melissa and a bunch of other people, Nancy Rhyme and everything. So, hey.
Hi,
Hi.
all. Nancy, can you tell Charles that we're on Zoom instead of Teams? Because I
Yeah,
sent
yeah,
him-
I will. I'll text him.
Hi, Emily.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Good. Very fine. Thank you. Happy day to you.
You too. Let me just send Ambrose the meeting code here.
You disconnected the audio?
Look who's here.
Hey, Mary Rose.
Mary Rose.
Hi, Ted. Hi. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Mary Rose.
Good to-
Hi.
Good to
Good day.
see. Good to see everyone.
Good to see you.
Well, we'll give it a couple more minutes here because it's just 3 Eastern now, and I know we've I can see everyone who's joining. Actually, I don't see, only maybe a handful of folks who RSVP'd are on, so that's great. So we're expecting more folks. But there's a lot of folks. They just that's wonderful. We are so glad to have everybody here.
So, Emily, are you in DC or Minnesota?
I'm in DC, well, Silver Spring suburb in my home office, but I am never left. So I'm about 13 miles north of the Capitol building.
I've been to Silver Spring.
Mhm. Oh yeah, I think I remember that. It is a lovely place to live, I think.
Good.
Yeah. Well, welcome everybody. I'm going to share the agenda here so that you all can see that. And then in just a moment, I will turn it over to Brad Brad Pierce, our president, to start the meeting. And I appreciate everybody being here today. And if you have questions and want to put them in the chat, please do so. And we'll be introducing after our keynote speaker, who should be joining us in about 15 minutes, we will be talking a little bit more about the organization and introducing folks a little bit more in depth that are on the call that are speaking today. But my colleague Vince Spinner, who is the noise national coordinator, will be helping me kind of monitor the chat, and we should have some time at the end for discussion. But we will make sure this meeting is also being recorded, so we'll make sure that we answer folks' questions as we can. But if you're not getting the answer, just let us know and we will answer at some point, even if it's after the meeting. So Brad, I will turn it over to you to do welcome and opening remarks, and then introduce our board and have them introduce themselves as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Appreciate it. I want to welcome everybody here to our Zoom meeting for noise. Looks like we have a lot of people here today, and that's great. That was our intention, to just open it up to anybody who really is interested in airport noise to attend today. So just want to welcome everybody. So I did want to have our board introduce themselves. I'm just going to open it up and have you all just chime in one at a time and introduce yourselves and where you're from. And I'm obviously I'm president of Noise. I live in Aurora, Colorado. I am chair of the Centennial Airport Community Noise Roundtable. I am also a member of the Next Gen Advisory Committee for the FAA. So we'll just open it up to the board to introduce themselves. So chime in as you see fit. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Rose Evans. I'm from the city of Parkway Village, which is very near to the Louisville International Airport, the second largest cargo hub in the country. And so we have a lot of nighttime noise. I'm on their board of directors at the airport, and I'm also on their community noise forum, besides being first vice president of noise. Welcome, everyone.
Hi, I'm Ambrose Clay. I am second vice president of noise. I've been on council in College Park, Georgia, which is not only next to, but has large portions of the airport in its city limits. It is the busiest airport by traffic, passenger traffic in the world. And we've been working with the FAA and the airport, well, since even before I got on council. I'm on 2 FAA committees. One is the Aviation Rulemaking Advisory Committee, and the Ascent Aero board that oversees research and development being done in universities and by the FAA on noise, emissions, and climate change. Welcome, everybody.
Hi, I'm Libby Garvey. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. It's good to be here today. I'm on the Arlington County Board. I'm the treasurer for noise. And we have Reagan National Airport in our boundaries, basically. I think we were maybe one of the very last airports to actually set up a kind of a citizens advisory group, which got set up here. And over time, we found that the advisory group was kind of, it wasn't seeming to be helpful because we were refused information and couldn't get a study paid for and a lot of things like that to actually track what really was happening with noise. So we joined together with Montgomery County, Maryland, and hired a contractor, which has been working with our communities and is about to give a report with, I think, some other options. We face the challenges of the protected airspace and dealing with the Secret Service and what they feel their requirements are, and a variety of other issues. I think all of our airports are kind of special and have, you know, wrinkles to them on what we have to deal with, but that's what we're facing. And we finally hired a contractor to kind of help us deal with that and hopefully get some good data we can then present and start to push for some better solutions for our residents. Good to be here, and I'm glad so many folks are here.
I'm not sure if Lene Palmisano from the city of Minneapolis is on yet. She is also on our board. I know that her her colleague Lauren Olson, for the Minneapolis perspective, is here for a bit later in our agenda. Lene is her ward in Minneapolis is immediately adjacent to Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, and they have at the city the airport working group. With she and her colleagues, and then they also have the Metropolitan Airport Commission participate, and they meet monthly to discuss this issue. And Minneapolis is quite interesting, as they have a consent decree where they mitigate out to the 60 DNL. So if Lene can join us later, that she'll provide some great perspective. But we're very lucky to have we have a very geographically diverse board. And we are glad for that. So can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. I'm just going to stop sharing here for just a moment so that I can see folks a little bit better. So, and Vince, I think when he has a moment, we'll share the agenda again. So I wanted to just talk through our agenda briefly while we're waiting for our keynote speaker, and I will introduce her in a little bit more depth. As we wait. It's very interesting, I believe, in these Zoom times where usually you're waiting for a member of Congress to come down the hall, and now we're just waiting for them to admit them from the lobby. But as many of you likely know, the Quiet Skies Caucus in the U.S. House of Representatives was established in 2014, and the noise organization, I guess I will introduce myself, which I'm going to do again in after our keynote speaker, but I'm Emily Tranter, the Executive Director of Noise. For those of you who don't know me, I've been with the organization since 2007 and been the executive director since 2019. And just really appreciate everyone being here, really appreciate the board's input. And as I said, the different perspectives from sizes of airports, from issue areas like freight or GA, busiest airport in the world, and then just the geography, Metroplex, non-Metroplex. It's really, it's great for our organization to have that depth and different perspectives of knowledge. So I'm grateful for everyone here today. And I think later we'll go through the main purpose of this meeting, which I know a lot of you have been meeting either at the FAA webinar or in your own personal local roundtables, or as a part of other, UC Davis, which was last week, which I thought was a fantastic event, have been talking about the neighborhood environmental study. And we want to talk about that today from the noise organization perspective. But if we look, sort of longer term, more globally for a longer period of time, the noise organization has really been about, making sure that communities have a voice. And this is going to be our chance, a very significant and not and rare in terms of timing, opportunity for communities to have that voice in this public comment period and beyond. But getting back to the Quiet Skies Caucus, we have had a host of priorities over the years in our almost over 50 years existence. And some of our colleagues on this call have been around the organization much longer than I, and have taught me a lot. But one of the things that has been a priority for this organization is to have a noise or Quiet Skies Caucus. So in 2014, when that caucus was established, as a lot of you who are here today, maybe weren't engaged in the community noise stakeholder group before NextGen, before the advent of PBN at your airport, or other factors, before capacity increases impacted you. But those, these issues have been longstanding for a lot of communities. And so this Quiet Skies Caucus was established after NextGen and after those issues started to arise, and the interest in Congress was really grew. And if our website has, which is aviation-noise.org, which has a lot of the information we'll be talking about today, but has the list of Quiet Skies Caucus members from the 116th, which was the last Congress, and we'll be updating it as soon as we get the updated list from the caucus shortly. But that caucus has it's a wonderful place for our members, for the community of stakeholders on these issues, to have a center point, a launch pad, a place to start the discussion of what Congress can do, and to make sure that members of Congress are paying attention to these issues. And a caucus, I think, there's a caucus for everything. There's a ducks hunting caucus. There's a, you name it. There's some really random caucuses out there, but there's a blockchain caucus. But the noise caucus, this Quiet Skies Caucus, is quite impactful in terms of having that center group of members who understand and who care about this issue. And so our guest speaker today, who should be joining us any moment, is Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton from the District of Columbia. And Libby Garvey can speak to this as well, because they are impacted by by National Airport, by DCA, which is the same airport that is actually in Arlington that Libby spoke about a moment ago. But obviously the noise impacts the district and Montgomery County in the DMV area, right around the Capitol. And they have so many interesting issues with the slot rule from members, making sure there's not that many basically gates for noise. It's a federally owned airport, which is an interesting dynamic. And then they have the P54, the restricted area around the White House and the Capitol. And so all of those things, as you all know, you all have your own issues that you deal with that are very unique to your airport. Congresswoman Holmes Norton, who represents the entire district and who is chair of the Quiet Skies Caucus, comes with that perspective, but also cares very deeply about this issue. And so it will be really great to hear from her about what she sees as coming down the pike for Congress in the 117th, which we're in now, what the different majorities mean, what the Biden administration means, but then also how we as a group of stakeholders can work together as a coalition to be working with Congress, to be working with the Quiet Skies Caucus, and then the committees of jurisdiction, and the FAA and the Biden administration to really make sure that we are advocating for the issues that we want to see addressed, whether it's as a part of this neighborhood environmental study or outside of it. And so I think we'll be very excited to have this partnership be even more solidified with her joining us today. The Quiet Skies Caucus has really, they have field hearings that she participates in, or briefings that they have that they have expert speakers come into the Capitol and brief the members on the Quiet Skies Caucus. Their staff meets regularly and communicates regularly. I know that some of our board has met over the years with lead staff in different offices of the Quiet Skies Caucus, and I have briefed them on kind of a noise 101. As you all know, this is an extremely difficult or complex issue to kind of get your head around, and imagine if you are a staffer who is, has several different issues in their portfolio trying to learn noise on the fly. So we try to be a helpful resource to folks and that. So I believe that the Congresswoman has joined us. I will pause here and turn it over to you if you are ready. And we just thank you so much for joining us, and really, really excited to hear from you today. So thanks so much, Congresswoman Holmes Norton.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank the National Association, our organization, to ensure a noise-controlled environment, or noise. That'll make people understand what the organization is all about. I thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. As co-chair of the Quiet Skies Caucus, I'm glad to meet with community activists on this issue and very much appreciate your efforts. I have been trying to get the FAA to take aircraft noise seriously for decades. Aircraft noise is not only a nuisance, it is also damaging to the health and sanity of our communities. Our Quiet Skies Caucus is committed to raising awareness about the impact of aircraft noise in our communities. Members of the caucus also introduced legislation to update regulations and increase funding to specific programs and initiatives that would decrease or mitigate the effects of aircraft noise. In addition to our legislation, our caucus also works to include language in annual funding bills to direct the FAA to take action on aircraft noise, such as, for example, reevaluating noise metrics, increasing community engagement capacity, and conducting specific research studies. We regularly hold hearings with the FAA administrator to ensure accountability to Congress and to the public. Organizations like yours play an important role in this process by educating communities, regulators, and elected officials about the impact of aircraft noise. I urge you to take advantage of opportunities to write letters and comment on aircraft noise policies. Hearing from you will be very helpful to us. I also urge you to speak with your members of Congress, your elected officials, and your local airport authorities, and to participate in local community roundtables and engagement opportunities. We must all raise our voices to ensure that this issue is taken seriously. The recent release of the FAA's Neighborhood Environmental Survey and the related public comment period provide a valuable opportunity to activate this network of stakeholders to push for more progress. Fundamentally, the survey results demonstrate that the method the FAA uses to measure aircraft noise is deeply flawed. These metrics are the very foundation of the FAA's understanding of aircraft noise in the United States. If these metrics are not reliable, that calls into question the FAA's framework of regulations and programs to reduce aircraft noise. It also suggests that the FAA may not be doing enough because to date, it has not understood the true scope of the problem. That's why your own work is so important. I am leading the Quiet Skies Caucus response to the Neighborhood Environmental Survey and look forward to releasing our letter to the FAA in the coming days. The Quiet Skies Caucus continues to urge FAA to go back to the drawing tables and meaningfully evaluate alternative metrics. We are also asking the FAA to collect and release data on noise complaints and annoyance levels on a regular basis so that we can develop an effective long-term policy solution. We continue to push the FAA to engage more deeply with affected communities beyond this short comment period and to continue soliciting your ideas and experiences so that we can all tackle these problems in a collaborative fashion. Thank you again for your invitation today. I'm hopeful that in the new Congress, with your support and energy, we will be able to make meaningful progress on this important issue at last. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I speak for I think I'll speak for our board and say that we look forward to continuing to be a partner with you and the caucus as a whole and work to make sure that we are advocating together as community of stakeholders.
Thank you again. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Wonderful. Well, I think that is a great opportunity for us to hear from the Congresswoman and have raise the awareness of the fact that communities on their own are a stakeholder group, which the caucus knows, but just solidifying that and raising that. And I will say that in our virtual world, that is a silver lining, is that we can connect easily in big groups, small but mighty groups like this. So Vince, could you share the agenda back on screen for me? Thank you. One moment, everybody. Fantastic. So I am going to give the executive director's report now, and I see the questions in the chat. We're recording them, writing them down, making sure that we can answer them and take note of those. So if when there's time at the end, or if they come up naturally as a part of our talk, if they're not answered as a part of our presentations here today, then we'll make sure to answer those at the end or in writing. I, again, am Emily Tranter. I'm the executive director of Noise, and I wanted to just take a couple moments to, before we go through the neighborhood environmental survey, to discuss kind of what noise is, for those of you who don't know, how we got to be where we are, and also some of the things that we are tracking and planning for in 2021 and beyond, both in regards to the neighborhood environmental study and also outside of that process. So, and actually, Vince, now that you've shared that, I'm going to ask you to unshare so I can share my PowerPoint. And then also talk a little bit about some really exciting developments at the Noise organization. And I would just invite Brad or any other members of the board to pipe in, jump in if there are things that you want to highlight about sort of the discussions we've been having as a group, as a executive board and staff. And then also what you are hearing in your communities as well. First, I will talk about noise background for those of you who may be new to us, and welcome. We are the national organization to ensure a sound controlled environment. We are an affiliate of the National League of Cities. So some of you may have come across us when you attend NLC, either in November, somewhere in the country, or in Washington, DC in March. And we have our meetings associated with their Congress of Cities and their city summits, which is a great way for when elected officials are all together to make sure that they can check in on noise issues. But again, in this new world order of a virtual world, we are trying to take the opportunity to have more meetings, this being the first with our group, with our membership, and then with friends of the organization. And so we are just grateful that you're all here. And this first meeting on NLC, for those of you who are tracking, is next week. This first meeting, we wanted to take a little bit more time because of this incredibly unique opportunity right now with the neighborhood environmental study. I am going to just mute folks here. So the one second. The organization has historically been composed of locally elected officials, mayors, council members, commissioners, and other city and county officials who are committed to working with state and federal elected officials, airports, and the FAA to reduce the impacts of excessive aviation noise on communities. And our membership is also open to community groups, to roundtables, to stakeholder communities, because this is the non-industry and non-airport group, which we know that those groups have very strong support, and they have deep benches, and we are growing, and we wish to show that communities have that same seat at the table. The impact, as we all know, is there and needs to be front and center as policies are discussed and established at both in Congress and at the FAA. So the other thing that we have been lucky enough to do as an organization, because we are the only national group, is to be able to brief Congress. As I noted in my introduction, we have done Quiet Skies Caucus staff briefings. We have testified before Congress on noise issues. We meet quite frequently with the FAA and the Next Gen Advisory Committee, which Brad mentioned he's a part of. And so we want to use our voice, and we want to speak on behalf of our membership as that central voice. But we want to make sure we've got input from our members and be sharing perspectives that are unique, that we can use to demonstrate what the impacts are across the country. And that is very important as an organization, that we are hearing from our members. So that is our background. Again, you met our board earlier. We are very lucky to have the diverse group the geographical edges of the country. And that gives, I think, and then also size of airports and airport impacts. I mean, some folks, Brad will say, Centennial Airport has not had next gen come, and Denver Metroplex has, but his airport impact has not. And then there is, Ambrose Clay, who with Atlanta, they're not only of 5 and then 6 runways being built, 7 runways being built, but the certainly PBN and Next Gen has had a huge impact. So the difference of experience is very important to having in leadership roles, and we are excited to have more input from our members who may have other unique experiences and perspectives on what you all are seeing and what your constituents or your neighbors are seeing. So I wanted to also just make a note and that Noyes has had the professional staffing of Lockridge Grinnell Nowen since 1998. And Lockridge Grinnell Nowen, which I've been an employee of since 2007, has been the professional staffing. We have recently merged in the end of 2020 with Primacy Strategy Group, which is also based out of Minnesota, but our office in DC has moved under that umbrella. Primacy Strategy Group is a 50-50 partnership between Lockridge Grinnell Nowen and a St. Paul firm, Synergetic Endeavors. And my colleagues are on here today, and Ryan Kelly, if our president and CEO, if you want to wave to the group, please do. And we are so lucky to have the staff and the all of the expertise that we now have with our deeper bench of Ryan Kelly and then Charles Kasbaum, who is our CFO. And then you all know or will get to know Vince Spinner, who is also on our primacy staff, but also serves as the Noise National Coordinator. So wanted to just introduce that as you will be receiving some communication that may have a different emails, and Brad Pierce will be sharing some more info via email to our members. But so I just wanted to let you all know that we're the same great team with just added capacity, and we're really excited about what that means for the organization and really doubling down and taking advantage of this unique and exciting opportunity that we have at this moment in time. So I wanted to also just quickly say that we will be taking advantage of this virtual world that we're in for the time being. And typically we meet in that March and November timeframe. But we will be having a virtual meeting in June 2021. Now that folks are more comfortable with this platform, we can meet more often and have substantive conversations and have meetings when we can't all be together because there isn't a natural focus point. And we will be doing the same thing in September. We will still maintain our November and March meetings as a part of National League of Cities, but virtual to be determined depending on what they are doing. And next week, because we have this meeting, we will likely not have NLC this year, as we understand, is being focused on some core issues. They're having sort of an abridged version. So we wanted of their conference. So we wanted to make sure that we had this opportunity for our members and friends to join together. And we will continue to do this throughout the years. I wanted to point to, switching gears here, about, as I said, outside of the the Neighborhood Environmental Survey, some pieces of kind of federal policy that we're monitoring and things that we're looking ahead to for 2021. And I know that the Quiet Skies Caucus will likely be introducing a plethora more of legislation, much that was in the same as last Congress. Every 2 years, Congress has to reintroduce their bills as a part of the new Congress, which starts in January after an election. And talking to members of Congress this last couple of weeks, this is really the time where they're kind of looking through their bills. And I know that, for example, Congresswoman Jackie Spears, who I think Kathleen, you're on our call today, is doing that process right now. And so there will be more and more legislation that pertains to our issue area coming down the pike. But just as an example of a couple of bills that have already been introduced, the Safe and Quiet Skies Act, which was introduced by Congressman Ed Case from Hawaii. Now that bill relates to air tour safety and noise, which Hawaii probably has a different dynamic than Atlanta on that. But I know that Los Angeles has issues with tour safety. New York does. And in terms of helicopter noise and safety, Washington, D.C. has some issues there too. So that will be one to watch and make sure that, that other members of Congress who are impacted by these issues are championing and being co-sponsors. And then Congressman Stephen Lynch from Massachusetts, who is a very active member of the Quiet Skies Caucus, has also introduced his air traffic noise and pollution expert consensus act. And what that does is directs the National Academy of Sciences to sponsor a consensus report on health impacts of noise, which also outside of the neighborhood environmental survey is a main priority of this organization, which is to study and mitigate the health impacts of aviation noise, which we all know is very prevalent. So I'm going to transition now into the neighborhood and environmental survey. And then I will have Vince share our statement so that we can have a group discussion and the board can weigh in. But again, many of you have been in many of these meetings over the last several weeks since the survey results were released. And so there is many more details to this on the FAA website, but I want to make some highlights in case you haven't been or heard any of the background. And I'd just like to take a step back too and say that I think we all know that this was long awaited. Waiting for the FAA to release this. Many of you advocated to your members of Congress to ask them to direct the FAA to hurry up. And I think we were expecting it since 2015, but the study even originated back in 2007. And it is really, the idea is for them to see what the noise impact is right now, how people are perceiving noise. And as an organization, we have said, just so many times that humans don't hear in averages, that DNL is not adequate to measure, and that we need to study or implement other metrics that are already established and figure out a way to implement them to measure the real impacts of noise. So the neighborhood environmental survey was released in January of 2021. What the survey had done was surveyed more than 10,000 residents living near 20 representative airports via mail, and then I believe they followed up by phone. It was presented to the public as the neighborhood environmental survey and asked them about more than aircraft noise. Aircraft noise was only one of 13 concerns that were covered in the survey. So being that as it may, the survey recipients did not know that airport noise was the focus of the study, which may answer the question about a lot of impacted communities who were kind of watching for this survey or watching for the residents to kind of report that they'd been surveyed, and that wasn't being widely shared. And this is really the single largest survey of this type undertaken at one time, and it calculated the national curve, which is, as we all know right now, the Schultz curve, which is how they modeled aircraft noise levels. It was established in the 70s, is very different. You can see on your screen, very, very different. I think Ann Cohut, who's also on our call today, in her airport noise report, just described it as stunning results. And we as an organization, I think our board, who I will turn to in just a moment, would agree that this is what we've been saying for quite a bit of time, that we are not measuring, the national policy does not measure noise impact appropriately, and that we need to come up with new metrics and new measurements for how noise impacts people, both annoyance, sleep disturbance, and then, as we said, health, learning, all of those things. So again, I know a lot of you have seen this, and a lot of you are engaged in this and at your local roundtables, airports, community groups. But just this illustration really shows how much more bothered people are by aircraft noise than the Schultz curve was representing or measuring. And so what the FAA has asked after the release of this survey is that the public comment on this survey, and the public comment is due March 15th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. And they want comment on 3 areas. Factors that may be contributing to the increase in annoyance shown in the survey results. And they do a good job on the FAA website, which we link to on our website, of completely overlaying the sort of the executive summary of the study. So you can look at this before you're commenting, but that's why we're here today, is to give folks some assistance, feedback, guidance on what this organization is doing for public comment, and connect you with others who are also engaging in the process. So the first is they want to hear about increase in noise annoyance shown in the survey results, additional investigation or analysis on effects of aircraft noise on individuals and communities, noise modeling, noise metrics, and environmental data visualization, reduction, abatement, and mitigation of aviation noise. And then the third is additional categories of investigation, analysis, or research that should be undertaken to inform FAA noise policy. So that is what the FAA is asking of us now. And that is why we are here now, to take advantage of this opportunity to make sure that as an organization and as the shared community voice, that we are engaging in this process. So I'm going to pause here after this executive director's report, before we turn to our environmental survey response that the noise board has approved, and ask any of the board members if they would like to add to this, to discuss any perspectives they have on where we're at right now, in terms of the survey itself, any feedback. And then again, when we go through the noise response, any individual input from our noise board as well. So I'll pause if any of you want to add in.
Well, I'd like to say a few things, Emily. And I'll try to go through this rapidly, because there's a lot of things that are going on here. This is, from my perspective, this is the most important thing that's happened since I've been on noise to make any headway. We've got to get the word out. And just to give you some ideas of what we've been doing, what I've been doing, and our city has been doing. First off, I'm providing personal comments. I've given them to noise. Our city, we have a airport director of airport affairs, and he is preparing the city response. So he has my technical comments. He's working on land use planning, because we're close to the airport and we have issues that we have a lot of undeveloped land that was cleared and that we now are trying to resettle. And that's a difficult situation, because we're talking out of both sides of our mouth saying we need to reduce airport noise, but yet we want to put people underneath it. So what I've been doing, I've been publicizing on my website, clayonconsul.com. You're welcome to the material on the website. I've got an aircraft noise page on that website. It has 3 presentations currently that I put on there that I felt were the most relevant ones I've given over the years. And the last one I did for a town hall that was held by one of our state representatives. And so I had to reduce the technology level of it and try to put it into simpler terms that everybody could more or less understand. So if that's any help to you, you're welcome to it. I have links out there to the FAA's page, including on that area now is a link to the video from the webinar that we attended this past Monday that the FAA put on. I've spoken at the Historic Neighborhood Association. I've urged attendance for the FAA webinar beforehand. I have a notices page. We have supported and I presented at the state reps town hall and presentation. I'm doing another presentation tomorrow night at another neighborhood meeting in a different ward that asked me to speak after they heard the comments at the representatives meeting. And finally, I've been out in the field making noise measurements. We've got a development going in right under the flat path of about 300 homes. And I've been out with my equipment making noise measurements and working with the developer. And we've gotten a commit from them that the homes that will be there will have an average transmission dB reduction from outside to inside of 38 dB average and 35 dB minimum. And just to put that in perspective, a normal house reduces about 20 dB. A treated house with storm windows and adequate protection against noise coming in through vents, et cetera, is about 30 dB. So we're going about 5 to 8, actually about 8 dB higher than that on the A scale. And I'll drop off and let somebody else speak now because we've got a lot going on. The point is, guys, you've got to publicize this. You got to get people out to comment because my experience has been, even the meetings I've attended, they haven't had that many people there. And we only got a few people from the survey. That 10,000 came down to a relatively small number. As I remember, 1,700 or something like that. I'm not sure the exact number. It's not stuck in my mind. But it was relatively small, like all surveys are. And then a smaller percentage of that were the ones that actually responded to the phone survey. So you went from mail to phone to people that actually were speaking on the phone. So we've got less than 2 weeks to get the word out. I'll stop there.
Emily, this is Brad. Finally back on the internet. I don't want to go into much detail, but yeah, the survey really is the how do I say this? The opening of the gate for communities and everyone to comment on it. I mean, they really kind of said what we all already know, that noise, a lot more people are annoyed by noise than we thought. And so in terms, I'll put it down to my local level as well, like Ambrose did. So the first thing I did was I Googled NES survey and that neighborhood environmental survey, just so I could get the survey and look at it. The first thing that popped up on the result was the city of College Park, Georgia, where Ambrose is the council member. So you have really upped your game in terms of Google searches on the survey. In terms of Centennial Airport Noise Roundtable, so we got notified of the public comment period as well, like everybody else did. We as a roundtable are going to respond with our comments to this survey. In fact, we have a meeting tonight. Monthly meeting is tonight, so we're going to talk about neighborhood environmental survey. But I just think that this survey is really a game changer, as Ambrose said. It's just like the FAA kind of, like I said, admitted what we already knew. And I think this is just a golden opportunity for us to really get the word out, send in comments, and that's just how I think about this survey. So I think others can chime in, but that's my kind of overall big picture view of the survey.
Libby, did you want to?
Yeah, I'll add some. This is all great. Yeah, I haven't been doing this nearly as long as a lot of folks on this call, but I've been doing it since about 2012. And this is the first time I felt like we're really gonna make some movement. I'm really seeing something happen, and it's a part of this survey finally getting pushed out. It really feels to me like for 4 years they just didn't want to put it out and nobody made them, but now they are. And yes, it dovetails on everything that we know. I don't know. I have great staff support, and Rich is on the call here, but we've sent out information to our folks, and I think we'll push out another notice to them. So we've been keeping we have an email list of people who are interested in airplane noise, and it's not often it's not so much a problem getting them to comment. It's actually to try to kind of tamp it down a little bit because they are so angry and so upset about the noise. The pandemic, I think, kind of quieted it down, and obviously not as many planes flying. It's a little quieter. People aren't talking to us as much, but that's starting to pick up. So we'll be pushing something out and really working hard to get our residents to write. I don't think that's going to be too hard to do. And I think it's great to go out and talk to people. That's kind of, a lot of you have done that. That's preparing the ground. And now it's really to kind of, strike the match and let's go. As I say, we've got an email list that we're going to just push it out to folks and let them know and give them the address and give them a little summary and send that out to them. At least that's my plan. Rich is here, I'm sure, taking notes. But I think we can do that. I don't think that'll be hard. And then we'll follow up. And again, I mentioned earlier on, one of the reasons I'm kind of excited is that this is coming at the same time as our consultant. Emily, are you waving at me?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. No, I'm trying to get, yeah. No, so it's coming out at the same time our consultants are about to finish up their report. So we're going to have some real data that we're going to able to put on. So we're going to kind of try to keep piling on and keep the momentum going. And it was great to have the Congresswoman here. I think we'll use the Quiet Skies group as well on the Hill to hopefully get them educated with the information we have. So I think we're all sort of saying the same thing. This is an exciting time. Let's go for it, guys. Thanks.
I would like to just add, what they all said is absolutely right. This is an important time. I guess my thing will be a question to the expertise on this group. When we make a comment on this survey, should we address things that are very specific, like when you make your new noise metric, be sure that you include a nighttime penalty, because we're mostly affected by nighttime noise. And is this the time to make that kind of a comment, or should we wait till later to do that kind of thing and just answer in general the way noise is doing and some of the other people are doing?
Mary Rose, that's exactly, in my personal comments, that's exactly the kind of thing I said. There are different factors, and we all know every airport's different, and we also know the further you got people who are close and people who are far away. So there definitely should be an aspect of a metric that takes into account planes at night, because all the research data has not been released. But believe me, what I've seen, there are physical impacts from noise disturbance at night, even if you don't totally wake up. So yeah, there are multiple factors, and you cite the ones that are important to you. I've given a list. In fact, we've got a lot of those in our noise comments that Emily has referred to.
Yep. And I would like, this has been referenced in the chat, and I think we're going to have a great time at the end of this to go through all the chat questions, but the noise comments are in some ways more general because we are at that, we sort of are that umbrella. And I think what the board is been discussing is that this is the opportunity to say we should all be commenting, because, as we say, when you see one airport, you see one airport, that the FAA should be, inundated with the kinds of things they need to consider. But that I would reference, there are metrics that are used. They're not what the policy uses, but there are metrics that are used and that could be implemented. And I think we want to make sure that is a very good point. And I've heard that more and more from the community, is that we could turn this switch on and start measuring. But I think we we live in a very diverse and large national airspace. And I do believe that this isn't going to be a simple undertaking for the FAA to just start using new metrics, because it is very difficult to measure on, use a policy to measure on single event. And so I don't say that to discount that, we really need change now. I think we want to make sure that this is a careful consideration, and that what policy goes into place, that it is considering all of these aspects. And that's a large bill. Lauren, I don't know if you wanted to add anything about from the city of Minneapolis's perspective, about what you guys are doing for the and as an individual city.
You read my mind. I didn't even have to raise my hand. Of course, most meetings I'm at, they just turn to me after they say something like, Lauren, do you have something to say? But anyway, it's good to see everybody. So yeah, I'm Lauren from the city of Minneapolis, and we're next to Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, and our entire population's within there's 1.2 million people within 10 miles of MSP. So we've always been very engaged on airport impact issues. So, the nature of our comments, and kind of in response to what Mary was talking about, we certainly are saying that it's important to recognize the nighttime impacts by continuing that penalty. And then we do get into details like perhaps you should also look at CNEL, which is obviously done in California and Europe. It's amazing that so many of these things that they need to do are really already being done around the world. But we do get into that. And then one thing I wanted to share with you guys, I really think it's going to be tough to start to chip away at nighttime noise issues, to try to reduce nighttime noise somehow. But I really want to start that long-term movement of trying to figure out how we can kind of get a hold of that. And I'm not saying what the right tools are going to be in terms of, whether it makes sense for individual airports to make these decisions, whether there should be a national effort to restrict at certain key times of day, or, parts of the night that are most impactful to people's health. But I know the city of Minneapolis, our comments are including that we really think that there's enough data about negative impacts of nighttime noise that it's time to start acting. It's time to figure out how can we actually reduce planes at night over people, So for me, anyway, that's something that we're saying it's time to act. Otherwise, too, we're just kind of talking about the metrics and what's wrong with the metrics in terms of not capturing the frequency of planes and, and the impact of concentration of planes, and the fact that, relying on averages obviously is very flawed. So that's, some of the nature of our comment, and probably could share a copy of our letter if folks want to see it, and I'd be happy to see what other people are doing. And thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. So before I'm going to have Vince share the noise comment that the board approved. We'll go through that, and then what I'm going to do is answer the questions in the chat. We gave ourselves a little cushion at the end here so that we could make sure that we had enough time for the Congresswoman if her schedule changed, but everything went according to plan. So we're gonna have plenty of time to go through the chat. I'll answer the questions and then open it up for comment. But I think the way that we're gonna do this to be most expedient and efficient is after we've gone through the chat questions, and if folks want to speak individually, just write in the chat that you'd like to speak, and then we'll go through those through the rest of our time. But Vince, if you could share our comment now, the organization's comment. So as Lauren said, she'd be happy to share the Minneapolis approved comment. If others would like to share their city, their roundtable, their personal comments for us to share on the Noise website, you can email them to Vince or myself. And that way we can share them as sort of a catalog of comments for folks to use, because as Ambrose said, and as our other board members said, we really want to get the word out. And so making sure that we've got that sort of catalog or arsenal of comments from people to pull from, not that they would we will put them in PDF, not that they would plagiarize, but that they are examples, they are understanding that this is, to give people some inspiration. So our noise comment is, gives some context. And I want to say that in the crafting of this comment, which is more high level and is, we aren't one airport, we are airport, we are community, national community group. The couple of things that the board considered that we discussed is one, that, we need to understand that this is, we as an organization really view this as the starting point. This public comment period is fantastic. We want to take it, the opportunity, and we want to really use this to right now in this abbreviated time span between January and March, get the word out as much as possible. And I think, as many of you have done, participate in the FAA webinar that was last week, do the meetings, do the roundtable updates, but really view this as just the start. And so that was one lens that we looked at this through, is like what our history is as the organization and what this public comment period is. We have long shared these, and Vince, if you could scroll down just a little bit, we have long shared these ideas as our organization's suggestions, considerations for the types of metrics that should be evaluated. We do understand that there are, single event, time above, those metrics exist. And I do think there is merit in looking at how the FAA, I think the noise board and there just is merit in investigating those as well. What Noise wanted to capture here is the kinds of metrics that we need to, the kinds of impacts that aren't being measured right now, or that aren't being used in the policy of how the FAA measures noise. And so when we say investigate, establish new metrics, I think the key here is that the FAA, it will be an undertaking because it will be national policy, and it will, if it's nationwide, that's part of the reason why the DNL has stood for so long, is because it is, with what the FAA was in his reporting was the noise impact, how much it impacted folks, that it was the best they could do. And I think the study that came out last spring, said that DNL is the best we've got. Well, that clearly, I think this group would say that that's not the case. And so, but putting a new metric into place, into national policy, into the circulation of how we then respond to that policy and mitigate and abate for noise is a tall order. And so that is the third consideration that the board put forward in this as our sort of umbrella statement, is to say that we've got to be communicating as we move through this. The FAA needs to be transparent and communicate, much like we have called for as an organization in community engagement with NextGen, with Metroplex, with every process. You need to be transparent, open, and communicative, and have the community as have a seat at the table as this is being implemented. But even further than that, we don't ask lightly that this be a main focus for the FAA, and understand that also comes along with the fact that Congress is going to need to support and fund this. So putting the FAA on notice and saying, you got to come up with this new metric now, and you've got to do it in a time frame and all that, that's great. We want to do that, but they're going to have the budget to do that. And so as an organization, we want to be their ally in a sense, to advocate to Congress to fund this and understand that piece is vital. Our noise comment is a baseline for what we are hoping that will be a continued conversation, nuanced and varied over the next moving forward very quickly. Not waiting, not taking more time because the metrics don't exist and we have to evaluate all of those. But we hope that this is just the start, and we want to be very, very active in that advocacy role and having that community voice. And we are very excited and glad that there are so many communities represented here today that will be doing their own public comment, because the one size does not fit all concept applies here. And you all have your different perspectives, and a lot of them are the same, but this is really the first chance as a community of stakeholders where it doesn't matter what airport you're at, that DNL is not sufficient metric. DNL is not a sufficient metric for everybody, and we need that to change. So I am going to pause one more time and let the board jump in before we go to the chat and any comments from our participants. So does anyone on the board have any further input before we kind of open it up to the larger group?
I'd like to hear what some of the other people say. I have 1,000 things I could say, but that doesn't do any good if I'm not answering questions that people are asking.
Okay, well, I know Ambrose, you will be, all of you will be here to participate in this conversation, to answer questions. And as I said before, if we can't answer or if there's needed clarification, we will make sure to respond. Because there is not that many questions in the chat, I'm gonna go through those first, and then we'll move to having folks put their names in if they want to talk, or put it in the chat. So just maybe wait for just a moment if you want to comment, if you want to have the floor after we go through these questions. So the first question is from Ann Snyder. How does one get onto FAA committees? I'm assuming you mean things like that Ambrose is speaking about. And that's a really good question. Personally, as staff of the organization, rely on the board and the members, Dave Carboni, who's here, who have background and expertise to join these groups. A lot of them are technical. But if this is something that noise members are interested in, to elevate their profile, to be nationally engaged out here in Washington DC, that is a really participation in the noise organization is a great way that as those open up and as those opportunities are presented, or we advocate for more opportunities, for us to be watching out for those. So I will answer that more thoroughly and maybe offline, Mayor, so that we can talk about it a little more at length. But it is it's a little bit of where there's opportunity and the expertise, because there are some that I, like the rulemaking committee, I have no expertise background. Luckily, Councilman Ambrose Clay does. But there are other places where having that community perspective from San Francisco are very important, and we want to be watching for those opportunities.
Well, Emily, one thing I might add, it's
Yep.
not just FAA committees that are valuable.
Good point.
The
Good
Airport
point.
Cooperative Research Program out of the TRB. I was on the helicopter noise panel several years ago. And that's a good opportunity to bring your real life experience into some of those discussions. And they are, several steps down the line, but they aren't an FAA committee directly, but yet they're doing work that is feeding into the FAA. And that's also, and those opportunities are open. All we would have to do is let people know what the TRB has, Transportation Research Board, what the TRB has in the way of openings. And if you've got some expertise in that area, we can support you, or you can apply as a candidate.
And expertise could even just mean your local perspective. Your airport happens to be dealing with this issue.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you don't have to, they're looking for a mix of people on there. For example, on the helicopter, we had a couple people that were experts on air, helicopter dynamics, pilots. They ran a helicopter base, but I was there representing the community, and I was representing my knowledge. I've taken noise measurements. I've learned acoustics enough that I can understand what's going on with the helicopter, and I'm an engineer by background. So I could come in from that standpoint, but there was a whole mix of people on there. So there were, I think, a total of like 6 of us on the panel, and some of them were very erudite in acoustics, for example.
Yep. So we can follow up more on that offline, because I do think that's we want, I think the noise organization as we grow, and I think the board would echo this, I was really happy for the membership to be as engaged as they would like, and use the organization as that platform. So we will make note of that and follow up with you, Mayor, and then also keep that in mind at future meetings, to be thinking about those opportunities and presenting them to the group as they come about, but also as our membership grows, where things make sense for us to plug in. Mary Jo Fremont asks, can Noise separate current members from past members on its website? Absolutely. Thank you for that note. We will be doing that. I think that there was some reasons for that, but I agree with you. It's important information, and we'll be making that change. Darlene, this is a very good, I'm going to read this question, and if others have input or feedback on it, please chime in. Darlene says, the NES report, section 1, page 1, states that through the Aviation Safety and Noise Abatement Act of 1979, Congress directed the Federal Aviation Administration to establish a single metric for assessing land use compatibility with respect to noise from aircraft operations, and to establish standards and methods for assessing the noise environment associated with ongoing aircraft operations near airports. Per ANSA 1979, Congress asked for a single system, not a single metric. Please comment on this discrepancy. So if I'm reading you right, the NES refers to it as a single metric rather than single system, and what the ANSA was, if you read it with system, it's that we shouldn't have been using DNL all along. That is a very interesting discrepancy. I've not heard that be addressed before. If anyone from the board or anyone from the group be interested, we could also discuss this further offline as well. But if I'm reading that right, that is very interesting.
Yeah, Emily, this is Brad. I think whether it's a single metric or single system, I think for me anyway, the bottom line is that single system, single metric is not working. So it's a matter of all the different metrics that we outlined in our response that Emily talked about. So, I mean, there's just a lot of different metrics that can be used instead of a single one or a single system. So I think we're trying to get the FAA to adopt or at least look at some of these alternative metrics.
Emily, I think I heard somebody discussing that at the UC Davis event that just happened last week. Maybe one of the people that talked about the history in the last panel, but they said that even though it said that it was a system, that the FAA decided it was easier just to do the one metric and went with that, and basically it wasn't challenged. So it was easier for them. But I mean, I think I heard that addressed at UC Davis event. So also, Emily, can you take down the letters now so that we can see the other participants?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for that note. Georgia asked if we can get a list of contacts the Congresswoman is inviting us to write to. We will provide that on our website. Our noise board and their affiliations is also listed on our website. I can share that again at the end, but we mean sharing our screen. But we will do that on our website, and Mary Jo, I can share that with you. Marie Jo, excuse me if I'm saying your name wrong. I will share that with you individually as well. So Jennifer L, hi, thanks for joining us today. I did reference your question earlier, and in context, I thought it would be helpful to reference in the context of the NAS. The question is, I would like to know what informed your metrics research suggestions, specifically why you did not mention that there's already a universe of metrics, single event, time above, without the need for additional research to immediately modernize FAA policies. I'm concerned that this is a gap in the education you are providing to the many outlets you have privileged to have because of your close work with the FAA. So I really appreciate that, Jennifer. I mean, I will let Ambrose speak if he would like to what educated that. I think what I will just say again is that Noise wanted to make sure that understanding that these were the kind of metrics that also needed to be considered. And it is the consideration that there is are metrics that exist is certainly important. I do still think that that we would not be able to turn a switch and just start to use those metrics and have a policy that that very easily tracks with those and how we abate and mitigate noise. But that is certainly an interesting discussion, and I think that I have heard many times in conversations over the last several months since this was released about that very point. And so I'm hopeful and believe that a lot of the individual comments that are given to the FAA will include that.
Can I
Ambrose, go
say
ahead,
something?
please. Yep.
Yeah. You know, guys, I think it's a lot like a mathematical equation. You got z equals 3x plus 2y plus 4p for 3t. It's a combination of factors. Take, for example, there's a perfectly good metric called number above. Okay. Number above what? Do we want FAA to pick number above 65 or number above 70 or number above 45? My point being that you have to consider what I would call the noise floor. And you have to also consider what the ambient noise is. So for example, during a rush hour at Hartsfield here, the ambient noise may be 43 dB that I measured. During that rush hour, if you were measuring the average noise from all the peaks, it might be 55 dB. But the peaks are hitting around 75 or 80 dB. So, and at night, do you want 65 to be the number above number? My point is that I think it's one metric, but it has number of different parameters. And that's what you need to fit all the different situations that you have. And so what we put together was a list of things to be considered. Now, fair enough to say that we don't want the can kicked down the road by the FAA saying, well, we got to do all this research. There are a lot of good metrics out there. What you have to do is put them together. And maybe that's where the system part comes in. That the final output that says whether you're going to be annoyed or not is a combination of these different things. And then for different people, if you're 5 miles away from the airport, you're not worried about average noise being high, but you might be worried about several loud planes at night waking you up. So night has to figure into it. And that gets into ambient noise level. And it also gets into whether people are trying to sleep or not. So I don't know whether that helped or not, but it's a complicated problem. The danger I think people are trying to address is that we have seen this can kicked down the road for a long time. And pardon me, I've been involved in this probably longer than I should have been. But that study should have been out a couple years earlier. And it could have been out a couple years earlier, except I never could get a straight answer when we were reviewing in committees that I might be involved in. When we were reviewing those things, the answer isn't, well, it's a surprise. I think it shouldn't have been a surprise, but it was a situation where you can't explain what's going on. How come? Are people more sensitive now? No, I don't think so. I think it's much more than that. It's just that we're seeing different factors due to the larger number of aircraft. And I'm sorry, I could go on and on this, but it is a system in the sense that there are a number of parameters that need to go into a metric to make it fit across the whole panoply of different airports, different neighborhoods, different climates, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think, so what I think I'm seeing mostly in the chat, first I want to, something you just said, Ambrose, speaks to what Ann Hollander has very eloquently commented on about what the NES shows. But then I think the majority of the conversation, and we'll capture others, has really been about the fact that the noise comment, is asking for new metrics, and that really we need to be focusing on the existing metrics and start to, push the FAA to implement that. And I think what Ambrose has just commented on is the concern that the organization has about, making that fit into policy. Not that the metrics aren't established and usable, but how that's going to look as a national policy and what that means. And I also think that the point that, I don't know that it's possible to have different metrics and have that the diversity of impacts and differences at airports be reflected in different metrics. Like, I do think that there will have to be a national policy, and that's the conundrum we find ourselves in. That is really the difficulty of the size of our nation's airspace, the size of our country just as a whole, and the difference in terms of how airplanes act based on where how airplanes act, but how the community interacts with the airport in terms of geography, mountains, non-mountains, things like that. There's going to be so many factors that come into play that overlaying those metrics onto a national policy is what we should have been happening for a long time. This discussion should have been started a long time ago, but that's why the realization or the concern that this is going to be a long process remains, and wanting to make sure that as they are moving through this process, which we are going to push very hard for that to be happening expediently, that they are considering all of the things, all of the impacts nationally, and that they put those swiftly into place and figure out the best way to do national policy. And we want to advocate for them to have the license to do that. So I want to circle back to Ann Hollander's point that the NAS does not show that people are more sensitive to noise than they used to be. And that rather it demonstrates that the FAA currently measures and predicts noise annoyance, underestimates annoyance levels by about an order of magnitude. Almost certainly because the past and current FAA noise policies are based on studies that never properly estimated noise annoyance to begin with. The Schultz curve and FICON were based on survey studies that systematically underestimated noise annoyance for a variety of reasons, including the fact that they looked at road, rail, and airplane noise together rather than separating out annoyance to airplane noise. The NES was careful to look specifically at aircraft noise annoyance, and is a more rigorous study than any previous study. And I think that's just a very good point, and that it isn't like, oh, all of a sudden people are just more annoyed by noise, and we just surprise that it was not studied properly. And I think if that has been misrepresented or perceived as misrepresented here, I hope that that's clear, that we've always, as an organization, said that noise has not been measured properly. And people aren't more annoyed now than they used to be. It's just that now we've captured it. So I I've just got a couple more. There's kind of been some conversations in the chat. I hope that I have addressed most of these concerns, and we'll open it up. I know that there has been, and these are mostly about, the new metrics versus, establishing new metrics or using established metrics that aren't DNL for a study. But I would like to turn it over to Michelle Rodriguez, as she has indicated she would like to address the larger group, and then we can come back to questions as we have time and as they are populated. And
Thanks,
Michelle-
Emily. So my name is Michelle Rodriguez, and I'm with the San Francisco International Airport Community Roundtable. And so we're a longstanding member of NOIS as well, and we represent San Francisco and San Mateo counties with about 1.7 million population. And we were lucky enough that HMMH, who is our aviation consultant, gave us a presentation on the environmental study. And we had a legislative meeting on March 1. And so we're developing so far we're at 28 comments on the 3 categories and a miscellaneous category. We feel like this is an opportunity to address kind of other subjects that might be related to these studies, and that this opportunity kind of opens that up for us. I think overall, as reflected in our strategic plan, we really want to see swift, concrete action necessary to modify noise measurement methodology, reporting, availability of data, mitigation measures in the community, and so on. So we're really not promoting a lot of new studies, but really within the authority of FAA, what are some concrete either modifications to measurement methodology, significance threshold determination agency, new noise measurement options. And I think we're also introducing concepts of environmental justice, because we have a fairly significant disadvantaged communities within our counties. And so we're really looking at how does that relate to environmental determination. I think we're also making recommendations about how environmental exemptions have been used on projects, and whether that's really appropriate in some cases as we continue to live with kind of the next gen results of cumulative noise impaction. We're also recommending that they address ground-based noise this time, as well as more consider how nighttime noise affects particularly those jurisdictions close to a very busy airport. So we'll be wrapping up those comments around the 5th. Yeah, it'll be about somewhere between the 10th and the 14th. We'll make sure to get them to Emily and distribute them to everyone else, and just appreciate the opportunity to be here and hear everybody else's ideas. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm going to turn it over in just a moment to Myron Casaraba. I just want to mention one thing for the group to think about after Myron speaks, which is Irene Howie. Hi, Irene. I'm so glad to have you here today. Mentioned that that in 2018, Congress specifically asked the FAA to reevaluate DNA. The FAA issued a report within the last couple of years defending the metric against alternatives. And the Congresswoman Holmes Norton pushed back on this report. Should we take this into account in the comments on the NES? And I'll just state briefly, I think we are the noise organization was pretty disappointed in that, the fact that the metric, was defended by the FAA in that study, and also added to the surprise that this came out, that the NES came out basically, kind of affirming what the community stakeholders community has been saying for so long, which is that DNL is inadequate. I do think that would be very important to consider, to say, you just defended this very recently. I also have heard Michelle mentioned the HMMH presentation that was given to her roundtable. I believe Jean and Justin, you from HMMH mentioned that as well, that it was a sort of a paradox. It was unclear how the FAA would come out with that. And then on the heels of that, come out with this study. So it was an interesting, that's an interesting point. So I think if folks were aware of that study, which I know many of you were, and I will post that on our website as well, if you want to incorporate that into your comments to say, you know, hey FAA, now your NES is really you're getting more to the point. So Myron Casaraba, I will turn it over to you. It's lovely to have you here with us today. And I am assuming that you can just go through your comments in the chat so that we can address those and whatever else you want to talk about, but I won't read them. I'll just turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. Town of Belmont, Massachusetts, have been involved with the Massport Community Advisory Committee. Probably have heard about the MIT RNAV study, which is focused on one of the procedures that impacts our community, which is the 33L RNAV departure procedure that was implemented in 2013. My comment is that, you know, the FAA are masters at delay and deflect. They're going to study stuff, which is great, but all the while they're deploying next gen and metroplexes, and honestly, they're not going to undo what they did. And so, to me, this is a strategy that basically says we're going to, you know, put window dressing, and now they've got community liaisons, and they're behaving better, and they're talking to us, which is great. I appreciate that. But at the end of the day, the appetite for undoing procedures that they've done is zero, and they're introducing now new criteria like you know, community consensus and other types of things. So I guess my comment, and then I'll just say, you know, in this group, I think you probably 5 years ago when we were in Nashville, heard about my complaint about the post-implementation review, which is basically useless. I mean, there's really no opportunity to sort of question once a procedure has been implemented. And so the idea, and this came from an attorney who's been working in this area for a while, is there an opportunity with the NES to create a procedural monkey wrench for the FAA? There's probably a pretty good basis that the NES created new findings that could potentially be used as the basis for a request for a supplemental environmental review. And the belief is that if you request one and the FAA is unresponsive to that request, that it may potentially give you standing or an opportunity for some legal action in order to try to change procedures. And I've been at this for 8 years. I'm about to retire if I can find somebody else to take my place on the Massport CAC. But I got to tell you, you know, we've been the beneficiaries of being able to have MIT do some great work. But last year we asked the FAA to evaluate the 5 options that had been proposed by MIT, and the response to that for all 5 of them was, no, they're really not feasible. And so, you know, not that legal action is the only way, but I believe that if we could get a number of communities that have been subjected to a FONSI based on the old findings and asking for supplemental environmental reviews, it may put some pressure on the FAA to actually do something.
Thanks, Myron. It's always good to hear your perspective and your thoughts on this. I am just going to answer a couple of small questions from the chat, and then again, we'll open it up to folks if they'd like to address the group. So we will be sharing this recording on our website as soon as possible, today or tomorrow. So that question will be answered. Also, Linda, I know that you had several questions, but one regarding how we could use this public comment, address how this public comment period could be used to address advanced air mobility and its new vehicles. I'm not sure that this would be the because they narrow the scope of what these public comment periods are address. But I would just encourage you and your coalition to write a letter to issue those concerns. And I think that right now in this process or this time frame, that's the best that we, or your best route, so to speak. So I know that folks are communicating in the chat. Are there others that would like to speak up? You can just type your name and I'll turn it over to you. And Noise board members, please also share if you'd like any thoughts or responses to this conversation as well. Jennifer, please go ahead. Thank you for all your thoughtful comments in here. And I know that the group would love to hear from you. So I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Emily. How are you?
Good.
And thanks for the session. It allowed me to understand a little bit some of the concerns. And I hope that we can come together to resolve this issue of metrics, which is not a metrics issue. It is really about what kind of criteria or how to understand different noise environments. And that is easily done with a lot of research. If we actually had dialogue, and I always say that the experts on noise are the people who are experiencing them. So that should not be done in a vacuum by FAA, right? So that's one thing. The question I have is, I think what Myron brought up is really important. We're all feeling the problem of FAA not budging on addressing next gen. We're all feeling that together. And what I think is really difficult is the fact that FAA has used these antiquated methods and metrics to bypass due process. And they are separating, we've had this conversation before, Emily, separating community engagement from the NEPA processes. And we really have an opportunity right now during COVID to take the time, and it doesn't take a lot of time to produce a couple of maps. It doesn't take a lot of time to do a review. And so I would just wonder how everyone could come together in order to request this supplemental review, because that's what's in order. And then through that process, we can actually discuss what type of metrics could be what type of threshold levels could be appropriate for, let's say, looking at N above. Certainly for Palo Alto, N70 would not work, Ambrose. I agree with that. And those are the kinds of things that we could look at, right? And there are models around the world with people that look at these issues. So, I mean, that's the real work. That's what would be fun for all of us to do and actually, affect change. So we need a process whereby we're all actually talking about with each other about these issues, but not, and sort of what, just channeling more research for many years. So I really hope that Myron's comment is taken to heart, because that's what I sense many of the communities feel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to, I appreciate that, Jennifer. And I do think that, I think we understand the frustration and you're right. There shouldn't be years and years and years more research. But the conversations that are long overdue happening now, again, we think that this public comment period is just one piece of that. And we really need to push as a large group, as a coalition of community stakeholders, to make sure that, the FAA is hearing from us in mass. So I'm going to turn it over to Rob Holbrook here. And that's the last person that has written that they want to speak. And then after that conversation, we'll wrap up this, and others feel free to write in that you would like to speak. But then I'm gonna wrap it up on kind of what the noise organization is looking towards this next year, and turn it over to Ambrose as well to kind of discuss what the board is discussing and what we're hoping to move forward as an organization. So Rob, I will turn it over to you though, and appreciate your input here.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Great. You correctly pointed out that the FAA asked for focus on 3 areas in the RFI, which were technical. The FAA also on page 1 of the RFI said the FAA invites public comment on the scope and applicability of these research initiatives to address aircraft noise. And I believe, and I think a lot of people on this call do, that there's a great danger that the desire for more research will lead the FAA to let the perfect become the enemy of the good. In the near term, the FAA needs to distinguish between the nice to haves and the essentials and get going with some changes. I think it's important that we all speak with a unified voice, I mean, to the extent we share it, that we need to be making a round of policy decisions now. If we wait for another cycle, it could take 7 years for the research to come in. It could take 3 years for a round of policy making, and it could take 5 years for the policy to roll out on the ground. And the FAA doesn't have 15 years on this. So we have made a huge leap forward in our understanding of the flawed metric that has been in use. And yet the FAA has used a single metric for 50 years and made policy based on that. So we have a better understanding of it. The FAA needs to recalibrate based on the input that they have now, and they need to start forming some policy and rolling out changes. It's great to comment on this other stuff, but it should be framed as input that will be helpful for another cycle of policy making to happen after the current cycle of policy making completes. And I wonder if there's any chance that you could capture that and include it in the response that you're planning on sending to the FAA. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, I think the board and I will certainly debrief after this and discuss these comments at length, and we'll report back. I did see and appreciate your input on this, and I know that I do think that just at the very base of all of this is the chance for us all to come together. I mean, we've communicated with our board in different aspects or different roles they play, or me in different roles that I play, or at UC Davis. Over the years, we've all connected, but because of this virtual platform, we now have a chance for the organization and the board as a whole to be communicating with and hearing from you directly. So I for one am really excited about that opportunity and hope that the communication continues. So I appreciate that, your input and you being here today. I also see that JC Harris and Marie Jo Fremont would like to speak. So JC, I can turn it over to you.
Thank you. I would just ask people here, my city, Des Moines, Washington, is right next to Sea-Tac Airport. We were assigned a community representative by the FAA Region 10 in 2018. That person will only meet with the roundtable, which is organized by the Port of Seattle, the operator of the airport. That person refuses to meet with any community groups or anyone outside of that venue. So it's sort of a gamed system. And I would just suggest that every group around the nation, one thing that would be easy to ask for would be to demand that your community representative be available to the entire community. Because oftentimes these roundtables are kind of at least in our case, is something of a gamed system. And the FAA uses that to hide and not actually engage with community members. Thanks.
Thanks for those thoughts. I think others share those as well. Marie Jo Fremont.
Thank you. So I want to use an analogy that I used at the A&E symposium last week at UC Davis. We are a patient or a medical patient. The doctor knows, the FAA knows we have cancer. They don't want to diagnose us with cancer because if they did, that would obligate them to treat us. However, so they follow the rules that they've created in their hospitals, which is we're not going to diagnose these patients with cancer because otherwise we'd be obligated. And I'm using this very strong analogy because this is what has been going on for a long time now. And I would like for the board of NOIS to review the recommendations because the recommendations are very clear. It suggests research for another decade. And I heard today, swift actions. It's time to take actions. We don't need to be perfect. DNL was not perfect, and that didn't prevent the FAA to organize their noise policy around DNL because it was convenient. So why are we establishing, impossible standards for us to be diagnosed with cancer? Millions of people are affected every day, every night. They're affected differently near an airport, away from an airport, but they're affected. And it's way overdue that all these FOMSI, as Myron said, that were established under old rules that do not make any sense. And by the way, not me, but some authors who have studied noise for 40 years and the FAA noise policy have said, the FAA has known since 1970 that noise annoyance levels were much higher. They knew that aircraft noise annoyance levels were higher, but it was very convenient to use these DNL 65 because it allowed the FAA to do whatever they wanted. So let's treat the patient, let's diagnose the patient because the patient needs to be treated now, not after it has died. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Janet McEnany, if you'd like to speak, I will give you the floor.
You're muted.
Thank you. I said, hi, Emily. Hi, board members. It's really nice to see you. It's been a very long time since I've seen you, like 2 years, I think. So I had not planned to speak, but when J.C. Harris brought up the so-called community engagement officer, I really have to say a few words. And that is that I do not think we can ever separate the idea of community involvement from changing metrics, changing policy, or changing anything else we want to do. And I want you to understand that the FAA really pulled a fast one with those community engagement officers. And so I would give them no points, respectfully, Emily, no points for community engagement in my comment. And I just want to tell everybody in, I hope, 1 minute or two, the history of that and why they won't talk to you is that in the 2018 Reauthorization Act in Section 180, Congress directed the FAA to appoint regional ombuds. The idea was for regional ombuds to work with community groups, that's what it says in the statute, to discuss noise, safety, and emissions complaints. The idea of that, which I know because I wrote it, was to use professional, neutral ombuds who know how to work with different groups to create rapport between community groups, all stakeholders, not just the roundtables, and the FAA, top to bottom within the FAA. So when the FAA was directed to do that, what they did was they said, well, we're now going to interpret for ourselves the word community groups in the statute. And we're going to say that it only means the roundtables. Then they hired people who one congressional staffer calls call center reps. They certainly were never the quality or caliber or skill set of people that were ever expected by the statute. And they directed them in their job description to only talk to the roundtables and only talk about noise complaints. And they pay them really a lot of money to be very high-priced messengers, to once again put in another layer between us and the FAA. And I really object to it, and I want you all to understand that. And I think that that needs to be corrected before any of the things that we want to do really can start to happen. So I've discussed it with my elected officials. I hope you will discuss it with yours. I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Janet McEnany. I'm the president of Queens Quiet Skies in New York City, a known instigator and rabble rouser. Like, I feel like I'm Tom Paine all the time. Hardly presentable sometimes in polite society when we talk about airplane noise. But if you want to know more about the ombuds and what to do about it, please just get in touch with me. Thanks.
Thanks, Janet. It's so nice to see you. All right, so this has been an incredible conversation. Jennifer, I did see your last comment about Next Gen. I will bring that to the attention of the board as well, and make sure that we'll respond to you on that as well. I would like to turn it over to Brad, just for Ambrose first, for just a moment, to kind of talk about our call to action. And this has all been extremely informative in terms of what our noise friends are providing input on. Our membership obviously informs our board, but this feedback and this conversation is very, very key. So I'll turn it over to Ambrose to just talk a little bit about our call to action, and then Brad and any other board members want to say any quick closing remarks, fantastic, and then Brad can say goodbye. And we will be putting this all on our website, and really look forward to having more consistent conversations, collaborations, meetings like this throughout the year, as we use this as our call to action, our galvanizing point to move forward. And push the FAA, and all of your comments have been heard, to push the FAA for swift action and not to delay. So Ambrose, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, let me see if I can make this quick. First off, we've got to get the word out. I think that's very obvious. There's still time to get the word out. And if we don't get a lot of comments, the FAA can always, that just gives them another excuse to say, hey, we put out our report. We have bent over backwards asking for input, and nobody commented. So I strongly advise you to get the word out to your people. We have another opportunity in that the FAA is actually changing. And I've been involved in this for a long time. They're changing. They are open to input. One of the reasons they're open to input, I believe, is because they don't know what to do. We haven't talked about the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is the airspace is very complex. You move noise from one place, it's going to impact someone else. There isn't a lot of good solutions. I noticed that Jim Allardyce is on the phone. He's an ex-air traffic controller and consultant friend of the people these days. And he and I have worked together to move flight paths around the airport to optimize things. But the airspace nowadays is very complex. It's layered. We have planes flying directly over the airport while planes are landing to the east and taking off to the west. And you have to manage that very carefully. That's why you got planes flying lower. Join Noise. If you're not a member of Noise, we need to be all this in together. I think, in fact, that the COVID has done us a favor. I think it's made it much easier for us to come together in meetings like this and have a really good discussion. So if you're not a member yet, consider it. It just makes us stronger. And ultimately, you can't manage what you can't measure. On the other hand, once you've measured it, you have to know what you want to do. With the complexity of the airspace, there aren't a whole lot of good solutions. And the economics of noise insulating people that are 10 miles out from the airport, not so good. So I don't know. I don't have a magic crystal ball. I don't know what economical solutions are going to be. But if we're going to get any economical solutions, we've got to unite with one voice, talk about these things, give feedback, try to work with the FAA. And with that, I'll turn it over to Emily.
Thank you, Ambrose. And our membership form is here and it's on our website as well. I'm not going to share it right now because I'll link it in the chat to our website. And then I'm happy to also answer any questions, be in contact with folks, myself or Vince or any of the board members. We will send a follow-up email to the group. Thank you, Vince, for sharing that, as well with contact information. And again, really appreciate everyone's input here. This is our chance. And as Rob said, you know, to the extent that we all agree, obviously there is room for conversation around what needs to be done here. And this was an extremely good conversation about with different perspectives that I think the board would agree that the noise organization certainly would love to have as part of our formal conversation and voice to bring forward. And the more people that we have, the more conversations we're having, the more input we have on our comments and on our from members on our interactions and on the groups that we do represent noise in front of the NAC and in front of ACRP. The more conversations we have with members, the better, and the more informed they are. So that is all that we had on our agenda today. I will turn it over to Brad to just make any closing remarks. And again, if any other board member would like to make a closing remark, please go ahead. But otherwise, Brad, I will let you close us out.
Okay, thank you, Emily. And I want to thank everybody who attended today. We had over 50 people attend on this Zoom call, which is really great. I mean, and all the great conversation, all the comments, all the things we talked about. I think it was very, very productive today, and having more frequent meetings is very, very good, and we're going to do that. The other thing I wanted to tie on to a minute ago was Ambrose saying to join Noise. Now, Noise is a membership-based organization, and Emily's going to send the information out. And for example, Centennial Airport Noise Roundtable is a member. You've met the new team from Primacy Strategy Group, Emily and Ryan and Nancy and Vince and all the other people. And you can see that they have done a ton of work in terms of addressing aircraft noise, working with Congress, working with local communities. So I really, really would, well, first, I hope you have seen the value of what the group Noise, the Noise organization, has provided. And then consider joining Noise, because we're all about the members, helping the members, working through the federal priorities with Congress. So I just want to encourage you to consider that. And that kind of wraps up my comments, Emily. So thank you again for everybody for being here.
Thanks, everyone. And I put my email in the chat as well. And it will be always accessible and welcome conversations and questions. So thank you all very much for joining today. I hope you all have a safe and healthy rest of your day and week, and take care, everybody. And hopefully we will have the opportunity to be back together in person safely soon. So thank you very much, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you. Very helpful. Thanks.
Everybody.
Stay well.